2 2 1 2. Mic check. Grand Rising. 2 2 1 2. Mic check. Mic check. Peace to the chat. Give me some ones in the chat. Is this thing on? David Corey said two. Everybody else said one. David Corey, how you hear us ask for a mic check? That's definitely two. Mic check. 2 2 1 2. Oh, who, me? Me, David Corey. The bones is clear. That's all that matters. I don't want to be talking. Two, 2 1 2. Well, if Fuzzy Wuzzy was a bear. There we go. Mic check. 2 2 1 2. Ooh, one more time. Give me another one just in case. 2 2 1 2. Wow. Mic check. Mic check. 2 2 1 2. Okay, yeah, my bad, y'all. I'm just sitting here talking to myself. Can y'all hear Bones? I know y'all can hear me. I'm sorry, but trying to get these. Thank you, Enrique. That's what I'm saying. But can y'all hear Bones? That's the question that's rising. I'm gonna be quiet. Bones, keep mic checking. Alright, Bones is working on the microphone right now for himself. I'm just going to say peace to everybody. Peace, Pamela Hall. Peace, relative. Enrique, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Grand Rising. Enrique. Brittany Davis, Grand Rising. LJ Free, Grand Rising. I do what I want to do.
Mic check. 1,
Michael
2.
Robinson, peace.
Can y'all hear me out there now? Mic check. 1, 2, 1, 2.
David Corey, peace. TMH, Grand Rising. Jeffrey Gordon, Gordon's peace.
Peace, cuz. I think she can hear me. Not sure.
I know.
Can anybody hear me out there? Mic check. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Antonio Baptiste, that's his name. Peace, Grand Rising. I'm slow.
Yeah.
How's everybody right now?
Yeah, I'm coming through now.
You heard yourself?
Yeah, I heard myself.
Sound like I'm inside the toilet. Now you know what the inside of a toilet sound like. Wait a minute, you put microphones in toilets? What did it do now? What's up, Free? You good, Bones? You got it?
Just making sure. You keep talking.
TMH said they hear you.
And say mine's low.
Yeah, keep it running.
We can adjust this real quick. Mic check. 1, 2, 1, 2. Is that better?
Well, Free, he's in Georgia and you're somewhere else, so he's. Said you sound far away.
Is that better?
Grand Rising, Free. She said you sound a little low, TMH says.
All right, hold on. Let me get this level right.
A lot better so far. Keep checking. I don't trust that last comment.
You say it's sketchy.
All right, TMH confirmed. I think I believe it now.
All right. We said now. Said that Baptiste you wasn't sure about. All right, Grand Rising, everyone. Grand Rising. Sorry for the minor delays. I had to switch some things up. Just rising. Okay. I already put the first link of what we'll be reading from. I already put it up towards the beginning of the chat already. And from yesterday's show, we were talking about the Treaty of Mobile, and really couldn't find too much on it. Did some looking overnight, and come to find out there is a section that mentions it. It's the Tom Bigby district. And again, I'm going to post this up in the chat for anybody who wants to go along with it. 1 second, posting it right now. I got that posted. Let's get this right here. All right, and it's the Tom Bigby district. Tom Bigby district altogether, also known as the Tom Bigby settlements, was one of two areas, the other being the Natchez district, that were the first in what was West Florida to be colonized by British subjects from the 13 colonies and elsewhere. This later became the Mississippi Territory as part of the United States. The district was also the first area to be open to white settlement in what would become the state of Alabama, outside of French colonial outpost of Mobile on the Gulf Coast. The Tombigbee and Natchez districts, also originally a French settlement, were the only areas populated by whites in the Mississippi Territory when it was formed by the United States in 1798. That's interesting. We have to go over that again. It says the Tombigbee and Natchez districts, also originally a French settlement, were the only areas populated by whites in Mississippi Territory when it was formed by the United States in 1798. It goes on to say the Tombigbee District was an area mostly on the west side of the Tombigbee River in Alabama. It was first opened to settlement by British colonists under the Treaty of Mobile, negotiated between the British government of West Florida and the Choctaw at a Native American Congress held in Mobile in March through April 1765. The British had acquired this territory from France in 1763 through the Treaty of Paris, after they defeated France in the Seven Years' War. They also acquired other French territories in North America east of the Mississippi River. The boundaries of the district were roughly limited to an area within a few miles of the Tombigbee River and included portions of the modern extreme southern Clark County, northernmost Mobile County, and the most of Washington County. Any questions so far, no sellout, before we go on to the history?
I just I said it was the only. Hold on, let me go back. My bad. That line where it was the only area populated by whites in the Mississippi when it was formed by the United States.
It was the only, yeah. In Mississippi, that was the only area where you had so-called whites living.
Yeah, exactly. That's crazy. No, the whole area. All right.
It says the boundaries set by the treaty in 1765 were described as starting at Grosse Point on the Mont Louis Island, then up the western coast of Mobile Bay, then up the Mobile River, then considered part of the Tombigbee to the confluence of the Alamount, Alabama, and Tombigbee rivers, and afterwards along the western bank of the Alamount River, in the Chickalance River, probably Reedy Creek near Choctaw Bluff in modern Clark County, Alabama. And from the confluence of the Chickalance and Alabama rivers followed a straight line westward to the, here we go, round the tree, cross the rock, over the hill again. The confluence of the
exactly.
Jackson Creek in Clark County, Alabama rivers. From there, it followed the western bank of the Banch River until its confluence with the the Tullahatchee River. And then they got it, the Tatalaba Creek. From there, they need to make up their name. Which one you want it to be?
No, right? Just give me the one that's the easiest. Don't give me
the two letter. Now I say from there, it followed a straight line to the Tombigbee River, opposite Hatcha. I'm not even finna mess that up. I'm finna say the second one. Hatcha.
Yep.
Hatchabee Bluff. Too many letters. And it followed a straight line to the source of the Buckatan River. The Buckatuna Creek in Wayne County, Mississippi. Yeah, that's Buckatuna. They bucking tuna.
Yeah.
Let me stop.
That's easy.
Yeah, that's an easy one. Buck the tuna. Down the Buckatuna River to its confluence with the, this is what I get for talking trash, Pascagoula River. And down the Pascagoula River. Feel like I'm back in fourth grade, y'all. Breaking down syllables. River to a point 36 miles, 58 kilometers from the Gulf of Mexico. Why they couldn't say that? 36 miles, 30 miles this way. Throughout the time to correspond to the 31st parallel, and then by a due west line as far as the Choctaw Nation have a right to grant. The treaty further stated that none of His Majesty's white subjects should be permitted to settle on the Tombigbee River to the northward of the rivulet called Centerbourg Creek in Washington County, Alabama. Again, it stated, The treaty further stated that none of His Majesty's white subjects should be permitted to settle on the Tombigbee River. That was being crucial, huh? Grand Rising, Golden Moon, Grand Rising. You got L.J. Free, David Corey. I think we called everybody else.
Afua Jones, peace.
And it says, although in 1765 the treaty encompassed all of what is now Mobile County and a portion of southwestern Mississippi, most of those areas had already been settled during the French colonial period or were not settled until several decades later in the 19th century. Significant settlements in the Tombigbee River area did not begin until the time of the American Revolution, when loyalists began to arrive in an attempt to escape persecution by patriots. One of the earliest of these was Thomas Bassett, who reached the Tombigbee settlement in 1772 and received a land grant on the Tombigbee southeast of modern Leroy, Alabama, from the Crown in 1776, and another at McIntosh Bluff. He was killed in an attack by Native Americans in 1780. Yeah, I guess they saying that none of them supposed to be.
So he got two land grants.
Yeah, he got two land.
He ended up with two land grants.
Yeah, but you remember what it said?
One in 1772.
Yeah, 1776 and 1772. Remember what they just said the paragraph before. In the deal, they said none of the Majesty's white subjects should be permitted to settle on the land. So I guess that's why they killed them a couple of years later.
Look, 8 years. He got there 8 years prior, and then he died. He was killed.
It said the British had West Florida until 1779 to 1781, late in the American Revolutionary War, when it was captured by Spanish forces under the command of Bernardo de Galvez. It formally became a Spanish, see, all that Spanish I've been reading all week, formally became a Spanish possession in the 1783 Treaty of Paris, which also ended the American Revolution. This caused a boundary dispute between the United States and Spain, with the U.S. claiming that the boundary between its territory and West Florida was at the 31st parallel north, and Spain claimed it at the 32nd degrees, 28 minutes of north latitude. Spain held the Tombigbee settlements until the Pygmies Treaty in 1795, in which they agreed to the boundaries at the 31st parallel north in return for the other cessions by the U.S. It was ratified in the United States Senate on March 7, 1796, and by Spain on April 25, 1796. Being proclaimed on August 3, 1976, the treaty stipulated that both countries would participate in a joint expedition to mark the agreed-upon boundary. President George Washington selected Andrew Elcott as commissioner. The survey was completed in the early 1800s, although American settlers had already been pouring into the area since the proclamation of the treaty. There goes again how they said they put squatters on the land, then they came with the surveyors.
That's trash. That's crazy, man.
They telling you.
Who came up with this system?
Yeah, we finna go out there and survey, even though we had people living on the land already. Don't worry about that. We just surveying still. It says, continuously plagued with attacks by hostile Native Americans who resisted the encroachment of their territory, they combined free and slave populations on the Tombigbee District, a part of the Mississippi Territory since 1798, was approximately 1,250 people in 1800. The primary town in the district was St. Stephen's, begun by the Spanish with the construction of Fort San Esteban in 1789. On June 4, 1800, the Tombigbee District became the central core of the newly created Washington County, Mississippi Territory. Washington County original boundaries stretched 300 miles, 480 kilometers east to west, and 88 miles, 142 kilometers north to south. The roughly 26,400 square miles, 68,000 kilometers of the country were later divided to create 16 counties in Mississippi and 29 counties in Alabama. Despite the great size of Washington County, the Tombigbee district remained the area of primary settlement. Tensions remained high between the American settlers and the Spanish in the Mobile district. In addition to nearly constant threat of attack from hostile Muskogee tribes, also the United States had found it necessary to build Fort Studer in 1799 to prevent its own people from taking matters into their own hands and attacking the Spanish. Prior to the War of 1812 and Creek War, the Spaniards in Mobile had allowed British merchants to sell arms and supplies to Native Americans to harass the American settlers in the Tombigbee district. Using this as justification, the United States annexed the Mobile district into Mississippi Territory in 1812. The city of Mobile remained in Spanish hands until General James Wilkinson took a force of American troops from New Orleans to capture it in April 1813. Anything you like to add on to this so far, no sellout? Besides it's crazy.
They built a fort.
Mm-hmm.
They built a fort to stop the people from attacking the Spaniards.
Mm-hmm.
And the Spaniards gave Native Americans
With selling guns and ammos to go shoot the Americans. I like it.
Oh man, James Wilkinson though. I know Wilkinson County has a fort.
Yeah, well, you know that's who Wilkinson County is named after.
Yep.
You're going into this little Fort Stewart. It was a stockade fort in the Mississippi Territory. Hold on, let me put this link in the chat just in case anybody want to look. Want to read along with it.
Man, you see that picture up there, the Mobile River looking north to it from the site?
Mm-hmm.
That's a vantage point right there.
Yep.
See all the way down the river.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I grabbed that one. I'm like, hold on. This is the picture we need right here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, posted what we reading from. And also remember, like we said, even though at times we do read from Wikipedia, there are sources and references at the bottom of the page that you can always check out and vet and make sure they check out. And again, when doing your research, make sure you can always find the sources or the references. So you can study the reference, just to make sure that everything checks out.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we at Fort Studer was a stockade. Started or Studer. They got it two ways. They got it with an E-R-T or A-R-D at the end. Two different ways. There was a stockade fort in Mississippi Territory in what is today Alabama. It was located on the bluff of the Mobile River near modern Mount Vernon, close to the confluence of the Tombigbee and Alabama rivers. It served as the western terminus of the French Road, which ran through Choctaw lands to Fort Wilkinson in Georgia. The fort, built in 1799, was named for Benjamin Stuart, also a tribute to Amos Stuart, married to Phoebe Reed, contemporaries of Daniel Reed, his wife Rose Reed, and his brother Amos Reed, and Squire Reed, the secretary to the Continental Board of War during the American Revolution and secretary of the Navy during the Quest War. Fort Stuart was built by the United States to keep the peace by preventing its own settlers in Tombigbee district from attacking the Spanish in Mobile district. Goes on to say the Mount Vernon arsenal, of which Amos Stuart and his wife Phoebe Reed reside as an Army officer. Walter Reed was also stationed at the Mount Vernon arsenal while discovering the cure to various ailments such as yellow fever. John Reed Swanton was also an ethnographer who wrote about many Indian tribes and their culture, including the Gulf Coast and the Tenshaw Delta. I'm going to stop right there for a second. Did you just hear that part? No sellout. They said Walter Reed was also stationed at Mount Vernon Arsenal while discovering the cure to various ailments such as yellow fever. Mic check 1 2 1 2. Making sure everything's still moving smoothly. Okay, start back where we was at. They said the area is native to the Mobile and Washington Mowa Band of Choctaw Indians on the Choctaw Nation of Indians and are named as such in various Choctaw, Cherokee, Creek, Chickasaw treaties, which also mention the Tombigbee River or other derivatives for the same river. The Choctaw Indians of Mobile and Washington County, Alabama were federally recognized by Congress of the United States and the American Indian Policy Review Commission final report of May 19, 1977, in which is cited federally acknowledged by the Bureau of Indian Affairs of Department of Interior under the Code of Federal Regulations, Chapter 83 in 1978, and which has been updated as of 2015. In the same chapter, to note that the terms federally acknowledged and federally recognized have same meanings, and that all laws in effect in the 1978 are presently binding as of 2015. Aaron Burr was held as a prisoner here after his arrest at the McIntosh in 1807 for treason against the United States. It says, for treason against the United States, Fort Sturt served as the outpost for Mississippi militia during the Creek War from 1813 to 1814. The site declined rapidly in importance after the capture of Mobile by the United States in 1813 and the establishment of the Mount Vernon Arsenal in 1828. And that's the history on that fort, on what it was built for and how long it stood around for. Any input on that? No sellout?
It's in today's Alabama. It was Mississippi territory before, and it's in Alabama today. So just pay attention to the years and what the states were called or what the land was called before. Now, if you're looking for relatives in these areas,
I'm glad
you
said
in the right area, in the right times.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that too, because that has a lot to do with some of the situations people come up with dealing with their genealogy. That a lot of these areas been moved back 3-4 times between different states, and depending on what the year is. So yeah, I'm glad you said that. Your city could have belonged to another state at the time. Going back into where we was on the Tombigbee district, pull up some more interesting things that was in here. All right, now I'm gonna look up this James Wilkerson. Well, General James Wilkerson. I was feeling he's gonna be very interesting. Give me 1 second, everybody, pulling up this link so I can post it. For those who like to read along, I had the information to check for themselves. Yep, St. Aaron Burr free, yep. Right on Alexander Hamilton. All right, posted James Wilkerson, another individual that was dealing with the Treaty of Mobile. It says, James Wilkerson, March 24, 1757 to December 28, 1825, was an American soldier and statesman who was associated with several scandals and controversies. Starting off rocky already. He served in the Continental Army during the American Revolutionary War, but he was twice compelled to resign. He was twice the senior officer of the U.S. Army appointed to be the first governor of the Louisiana Territory in 1805 and commanded two unsuccessful campaigns in the St. Lawrence River Theater during the War of 1812. He died while posted as a diplomat in Mexico City. In 1854, following extensive archival research in the Spanish archives in Madrid, Louisiana historian Charles Clary exposed General James Wilkerson as having been a highly paid spy in the service of the Spanish Empire. In the years since research became public, General James Wilkerson has been savagely condemned by American historians and politicians. According to Theodore Roosevelt, in all our history, there is no more detestable character. However, he has been defended, especially in breaking up the Burr conspiracy. So they saying this was working for the Spanish the whole time. Goes on and says personal life. James Wilkinson was born about 3 miles, 5 kilometers northeast of Benedict, Charles County, Maryland, on a farm south of Hunting Creek. His grandfather had been sufficiently wealthy to buy a large property known as Stokely Manor in Claveret County.
Calvert,
Calvert,
Calvert County.
Calvert County. The family felt that although their property was smaller, they still belonged to a higher social class. According to historian Andrew, Linklater?
Link, link, link later.
Linklater.
Link,
James Andrew
link.
Linklater. I'm sorry, y'all. It's this dude named Linklater.
That's his name. That's his
The
name. Link
name.
later, yo.
Yeah, we're gonna link him later. James grew up with the idea that the image of respectability accused the reality of betrayal. His father, Joseph Wilkinson, inherited the property, but by the time the family was in debt in 1764, Stokely Manor was broken up and sold. His older brother Joseph inherited the property after his father died, and as the second son, James was left with nothing. Linklater argued that his upbringing led to James' aggressive reaction towards insults on his behavior. His father had left with the last words of, "My son, if you ever put up with an insult, I would disinherit you." Wow. Wilkinson received his early education from a private tutor, funded by his grandmother. His study of medicine in Philadelphia at the University of Pennsylvania was interrupted by the American Revolution. Telling me that wasn't cold. He said, "If you ever take an insult, I'm going to disown you." Wilkinson married Ann Biddle, 1742 to 1807, of the prominent Biddle family of Philadelphia, on November 12, 1778, in Philadelphia. She was the first cousin of Charles Biddle, an associate of Aaron Burr, and Wilkinson's marriage to the dynamic Biddle helped his career as a politician in general. She died on February 23, 1807. The couple had 4 sons: John, 1780 to 1796, James Biddle, 1783 to 1813, Joseph Biddle, 1789 to 1865, and Walter, born 1791. James and Walter Burr served as captains in the U.S. Army. After Ann's death, James Wilkinson married what they say Celestine Lavue Trudeau. I've seen that name before. James Wilkinson married Celestine Lavue Trudeau, daughter of Charles Lavue Trudeau, on March 5th, 1810, with whom he had 3 children: twin girls Stephanie and Theophany, and a son Theodore, born 1819. Theophany died as a child in the early 1822. If I remember correctly, that's the Trudeau family, which goes into the president of Canada now, which ties back into the Clintons, that ties back into Chief Joseph Corn, well, Chief Corn Planter.
Yeah, we'd have to trace that back, but that sounds like a Trudeau's.
If I remember it correctly. Yeah, and I know the Trudeaus are related to the Clintons, just as well as Justin Bieber, but that's a story for another day.
Level Trudeau.
Mm-hmm. Him and Kelsey Grammer. Revolutionary War Service. They say Wilkinson first served in the Thompson, Pennsylvania Rifle Battalion in 1775 through 1776 and was commissioned a captain in September 1775. He served as an aide to Nathaniel Greene during the siege of Boston. Participated in placing of guns on the Dorset Heights in March 1776 and following the British abandonment of Boston. Went with the rest of the Continental Army to New York, where he left Greene's staff and was given command of an infantry company. It said sent to Canada as part of the reinforcement for the Benedict Arnold's army besieging Quebec. He arrived just in time to witness the arrival of 8,000 British reinforcements under General John. General John was at Burgoyne, which precipitated the collapse of the American effort in Canada. He became aided to Arnold just prior to the final retreat and left Canada with Arnold on their very last boat. Shortly thereafter, he left Arnold's service and became an aide to General Horatio Gates in August 1776. When Gates sent him to Congress with the official dispatch about the victory at the Battle of Saratoga in 1777, Wilkinson kept Congress waiting while he attended to personal affairs. When he finally showed up, he embellished his own role in the victory and was reverted as a brigadier general, despite being only 20 years old at the time. On November 6, 1777, and appointed to nearly created board of war, the promotion over more senior colonies caused an uproar among Continental officers, especially because Wilkinson's gossiping seemed to indicate he was a participant in the Conway Cabby, a conspiracy to replace George Washington. With Horatio Gates, or Horatio Gates, however you want to pronounce it, depends on which dialect you're speaking, as commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. Gates soon had enough of Wilkinson, and the young officer was compelled to resign in March 1778. On July 29, 1779, Congress appointed him Closet General of the Army, but he resigned on March 27, 1781 due to his lack of aptitude for the job. So these people had a hit to replace the president, huh? Well, the so-called president. No, Sellout, do you think you can read part of the Kentucky Ventures? I got a call I got to answer real quick. It'll be no more than 2 minutes.
All right, 1 second, let me find out where it was at.
Yes, the James Wilkinson. That's the next paragraph was a Kentucky Ventures. After I guess he tried to assassinate the president. Just give me 2 minutes. I'll be right back. That's an important call.
Gotcha. All right. So he's embellishing his role in some things right now, and had to resign. So let's see. Kentucky Ventures. All right. After his resignation from the Continental Army, Wilkinson reluctantly became a brigadier general in the Pennsylvania militia in 1782, and also a state assemblyman in 1783 due to the wishes of George Washington. He moved to Kentucky, at that time just 3 counties still belonging to Virginia, in 1784, and he was active there in efforts to achieve independence from Virginia. In April 1787, Wilkinson made a highly controversial trip to New Orleans, which was the capital of Spanish colonial Louisiana. At that time, Americans were allowed to trade on the Mississippi River. They had to pay a hefty tariff. Wilkinson met with the Spanish governor, Esteban Rodriguez Miro, and managed to convince him to allow Kentucky to have a trading monopoly on the river. In return, he promised to promote Spanish interest in the West. On August 22nd, 1787, Wilkinson signed an expatriation declaration and swore allegiance to the King of Spain to satisfy his own commercial needs. The Spanish conspiracy, as it is known, was initiated by Wilkinson's first memorial, a 7,500-word report written before he had left New Orleans for Charleston to the Spanish concerning the political future of Western settlers, and to convince Spain to admit us Kentuckians under protection as vassals. I'm not sure what that word. This was encoded with myriad symbols, numbers, and letters that was decoded via a complex English-Spanish cipher code named Number 13, which became the basis for his pseudonym, Agent 13. Wow, this man was a super spy, I guess. Yeah. Upon returning to Kentucky in February 1788, Wilkinson vigorously opposed to the new U.S. Constitution. Kentucky had very nearly achieved statehood under the old Articles of Confederation, and there was widespread disappointment when this was delayed because of the new Constitution. Get a mic check real quick. Mic check. She said, "Who was this guy?" Yeah, exactly. Did I lose my place? Nope. Leading up to Kentucky's 7th convention regarding separation from Virginia in November 1788, Wilkinson attempted to gauge the support for Kentucky to seek union with Spain. Wilkinson's ability to win people over with his charm and sincerity got him elected committee chairman at the convention. He advocated for Kentucky to seek independence from Virginia first and then to consider joining the Union of States as a second step. For many, joining the Union was conditional upon the Union negotiating with Spain to arrange free navigation on the Mississippi River, a contentious point which the eastern states would act upon. Unable to gather enough support for his position at the convention, Wilkinson then approached Miro with a proposal. His intention was to obtain a grant of 60,000 acres, 243 square kilometers, in the Yazoo lands at the junction of the Yazoo River and the Mississippi near present-day Vicksburg. The land was to serve as payment for Wilkinson's efforts on behalf of Spain and to serve as a refuge in the event he and his supporters had to flee from the United States. Wilkinson asked for and received a pension of $7,000 from Miro, while requesting pensions on behalf of several prominent Kentuckians, including Harry Ennis, Benjamin Sebastian, John Brown, Caleb Wallace, Benjamin Logan, Isaac Shelby, George Muter, George Nicholas, and even Humphrey Marshall, who at one time was a bitter rival of Wilkinson's. Man, getting you paid, and you was hating. However, by 1788, Wilkinson had apparently lost the confidence of the officials in Spain. Miro was not to grant any of the proposed pensions and was forbidden from giving money to support a revolution in Kentucky. Furthermore, Wilkinson continued to secretly receive funds from Spain for many years. They didn't fix the glitch. I'm echoing. Mic check.
I'm
Mic
back.
check.
I'm back.
I did all that reading. How convenient, folks. David Corey said I was echoing that whole time.
Let me check this thing.
That's way. And then I got a playback error. Mic check. 2 2 1 2.
Yeah, they said you was echoing pretty bad on your end. Mic check 1 2 1 2. Is the sound clearer? Mic check 1 2 1 2. The sound a lot clearer. Want to make sure we got the echoing fixed. Dudu said you was echoing like a horse race announcer. Well, they said it's better. All right. Okay, looking. You remember the last paragraph you was at real quick? All right, I found it. All right, what do you say? However, by 1788, Wilkinson had apparently lost the confidence of officials in Spain.
Well, I want to. Well, you might as well run it back. If I was echoing that bad, we probably need to run it back. Unless everybody heard me. I was echoing bad enough to not hear, or mic check. 2 2 1 2.
Yeah, everyone is saying you clear.
I'm coming in clear. All right.
They was asking you to say something.
We can say something. Something.
1 2 1 2.
Nah, mic check. I do what I want to do.
Is that clearer? We're just waiting to find out it's clearer before we move on. That everybody can hear me and no sell out.
Let me go back and read a little bit of something.
And Doodoo Vision, your links should be sent to you if you wanted to join this rising. Links already in the email and in the back chat for you.
So I'm going to read that to get a mic check. However, by 1788, Wilkinson had apparently lost the confidence of officials in Spain. Miro was not to grant any of the proposed pensions and was forbidden from giving money to support a revolution in Kentucky. Furthermore, Wilkinson continued to secretly receive funds from Spain for many years. Mic check. Mic check. Echo. What is going on? Saboteur.
Something wrong now. You don't got two devices. Oh, no, you only got one device on.
Yeah. I know my phone is on. Go ahead. Let me double check. What's going on?
Give us a second, finding out what's going on real quick.
Man, was I echoing when I was ad-libbing? What's going on today?
Yeah, you don't have two devices signed in today, do you?
No, but I was about to switch.
Yeah, switch. Yeah, that could be it too. So give us 1 second, just switching real quick. Something going on with the signal. Give us at least a couple seconds.
My bad. Mic check.
Mic 1 2 1 2. Is that better, everyone?
Mic check. Mic check.
Let me know. Can y'all
Two,
hear
two,
no
1, 2.
sellout without no echoing?
2, 2, 1, 2.
There ain't no sellout signals. They bet everyone. They were like, you came in like you ran in there with that helmet. Get out the way. Take this. Nah.
Oh man. David Corey, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Mic check. Holla, 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 holla.
Is the signal clean on those sellout vocals?
Man, what am I doing wrong? Mic check. Guess I just won't read today. I don't like this other device. Mic check. Check. 2, 2, 1, 2. Mic check. Still a little echo. I'm only saying something once. Mic check. 2, 2, 1, 2. What is today? Is today Friday?
Yep.
Yes, it is. Today's Friday. Just make
Is
sure.
that clear?
Sometimes it feels like a Monday.
All right, they say that's better. I don't know what that was. But then at the same time, I seen a signal spike too on this end.
Oh, wow.
All right,
Appreciate it, everybody.
All right, sorry about that, everyone. This rising. Had a couple of difficulties we had to fix real quick. Now we should be better.
Weapon. I sound that good? I appreciate y'all.
They said you sound great now.
Great. Tony the Tiger. All right. And I also lost my place, just so you know. Hold on. It went back. Hold on. Man, what is happening? Was it that great?
You found it back, or
Oakland said the devil is alive. We need our cat.
you was able to find where you left off at, or?
Yeah, I think I know where I'm at. I was just dealing with this. Yeah, I can let you know where I was at. I'm gonna keep the ad lib to myself too. Some echo.
I don't know why.
We're at the next section.
I'm gonna say second military career.
Second.
All right.
I'm gonna go on mute.
All right. It says the second military career in the Northwest Indian War. Colonel Wilkerson led a force of Kentucky volunteers against American Indians at the Quantaton in May 1791.
That's a French word.
Yeah.
O-U-I. We.
Yeah.
We attending. Wow.
He commanded a follow-up raid. Yeah. That autumn, highlighted by the Battle of, here go another one, Quinnipiac, Quinnipiac. Woo, that's a long one. I'll let you mess that one up. In October. Yeah, whatever no sellout just said. In order, he received a commission to the U.S. Army as Lieutenant Colonel, commander of the 2nd U.S. Infantry, as he had a rivalry with Wayne. When the United States government recognized the Army as the Legion of the United States, President George Washington was faced with the decision of whom to name as its commanding general. The two candidates for this promotion were Wilkerson and Anthony Wayne. And they chose Wayne due to Wilkerson's suspected involvement with the Spanish government. The cabinet promoted Wilkerson to brigadier general as a brigadier general as consultant since the president was aware of Wilkerson's fragile ego. Wilkerson developed a jealousy of Wayne, but he maintained an obscenable respect toward the general. However, upon Wilkerson's refusal of the invitation to Wayne's Christmas party, Wayne developed a full-fledged hatred for Wilkerson. Over a Christmas party? Dang. Deeming the refusal to be an act of disrespect. For example, Wayne had led the Legion Army against the Native Americans in the Battle of Fallen Timbers in August 1794. This battle was a huge victory for the United States, yet Wilkerson had criticized General Wayne's actions during the battle simply to antagonize him. It says Wilkerson proceeded to file formal complaints with President Washington against Wayne and his decisions. Upon finding out about the complaints against him, Wayne decided to fight back, launching an investigation into Wilkerson's history with the Spanish. During all of this time, Wilkerson had renewed his secret alliance with the Spanish government. The governors of Louisiana, Francisco Luis Hector de Cardenatlet, alerting them to the actions of both the U.S. and the French occupancy in North America. When Spanish couriers were intercepted carrying payments for Wilkerson, Wayne's suspicions were confirmed, and he admitted to court-martial Wilkerson for his treachery. However, Wayne developed a stomach ulcer and died on December 5, 1796. How convenient. There was no court-martial. Instead, Wilkerson began his first tenure as senior officer of the Army, which lasted for about a year and a half. He continued to pass on intelligence to them in return for large sums in gold, but most of his information was of little value. This is the quasi-war with France. Wilkerson was transferred to the southern frontier in 1798. During the quasi-war crisis of the late 1790s between France and the United States, he was in the third-place rank in the U.S. Army behind George Washington, who had been succeeded as president by Adams, died in December 1799, and Alexander Hamilton. Among other duties, Wilkerson was charged by Hamilton with establishing a reserve corps of the American troops in the lower Ohio River Valley, who would seize the lower Mississippi River Valley and New Orleans in the event of war with France and her ally Spain. Despite the end of the crisis in the mid-1800s and Hamilton being discharged from the Army, Wilkerson, for unknown reasons, continued the plan for the establishment of the base, which he named Cantonment Wilkerson, after himself, located in Indian Territory, now southern Illinois. The base operated from January 1801 to late 1802, before finally being abandoned. Archaeologists from Southern Illinois University have located the remains of this base, which is producing much previously unknown information and artifacts from the daily life of the Frontier Army. Goes on to say Wilkerson served his second longer term as senior officer of the Army from June 15, 1800 until January 27, 1812, when former Secretary of War Henry Dearborn was promoted to Major General over Wilkerson. Next chapter, it says service under President Jefferson. Wilkerson remained senior officer of the United States Army under President Thomas Jefferson, along with Governor William C. Claiborne. Wilkerson shared the honor of taking possession of the Louisiana Purchase on behalf of the United States in 1803. At this time, Wilkerson renewed his treasonous relationship with the Spanish colony officials. offering advice to them on how to contain American expansion in exchange for the restoration of his pension. Among other things, Wilkinson tipped off the Spanish to the object of the Lewis and Clark expedition and provided advice to the Marquess of Casa Calvo to aid in his negotiations over the Texas-Louisiana border. Next chapter is states connections with Aaron Burr. In 1804 to 1805, he met in person with Aaron Burr, and they exchanged letters regarding Burr's conspiracy. After Burr's arrest, he claimed he was leading a group of settlers to take up residence on the land in Texas, which he had leased from the Spanish government in Mexico, while the government charged him with treason and claimed he intended to separate the then Western states and territories from the United States and establish an independent nation. Wilkinson was both senior brigadier general of the United States Army and the first governor of the Louisiana Territory, which made him someone who supported Burr would cultivate in 1806. Burr is supposed to have sent a coded, unsigned letter, the cipher letter, which Burr later denied having written, to Wilkinson, which stated that he was ready to commence his movement to Texas. Burr's subsequent efforts to recruit participants in his plan became public, raising fears that he was conspiring with England to start a war with Spain. Wilkinson became fearful that his role in Burr's plan or his spying for Spain would be exposed. In October 1806, Wilkinson sent to President Jefferson a letter in which he painted Burr's action in the worst possible light, while portraying himself as innocent of any involvement. Jefferson ordered Burr's arrest, and Burr was apprehended near Natchez, Mississippi. Ain't that something? It goes further on. Wilkinson testified at Burr's trial, and the documents presented as evidence included the cipher letter, which Wilkinson had given the prosecution. However, the letter was clearly altered to minimize Wilkinson's culpability. This forgery, coupled with Wilkinson's obvious self-serving testimony, had the effect of making Burr seem to be the victim of an overzealous government. The grand jury nearly produced enough votes in favor of indicting Wilkinson for misprision of treason. And Foreman John Randolph said of Wilkinson that he was a mammoth of inequity, the most finished scoundrel, and the only man I ever saw who was from the bark to the very core a villain. Dang. During Burr's trial, Wilkinson placed New Orleans under martial law against the will of Governor Claiborne and imprisoned several people whom he thought may be able to connect him to Burr, along with attorneys who tried to defend them. Dang, it's getting nasty. He was removed from the territorial governor's office after being publicly criticized for heavy-handed administration and abuse of power, and replaced with Meriwether Lewis. In addition, his actions around the Burr conspiracy became public, which aroused the public against him and led to 2 congressional inquiries into his private ventures and intrigues. President James Madison, who had succeeded Jefferson in 1809, ordered a military court of inquiry in 1811, which resulted in the court-martial of Wilkinson. It says the War of 1812. Wilkinson was commissioned a major general during the War of 1812. On March 2, 1813, that same month, Wilkinson led the American force which occupied Mobile in Spanish West Florida, effectively implementing the inclusion of the Mobile district in the Mississippi Territory. He was then assigned to the St. Lawrence River Theater of War. Following Henry Dearborn's reassignment, Wilkinson engaged in 2 failed companies, the Battle of Chrysler's Farm and the Second Battle of LaCroix Mills. He was then relieved from active duty, but he was cleared in a military inquiry. He was discharged from the Army on June 15, 1815 and 1816. Wilkinson published memoirs of my own times in the final attempt to clear his name. It goes on to say, in his last years, After the end of his military career, Wilkerson was appointed as U.S. envoy to Mexico. This was during the period of the Mexican War of Independence against Spain, which was won in 1821. And that year, Wilkerson requested a Texas land grant. While awaiting the Mexican government's approval of his land scheme, Wilkerson died in Mexico City on December 28, 18 at the age of 68. He was buried in Mexico. Wilkerson's involvement with the Spanish as Agent 13 was widely suspected in his own day, but it was not proven until 1854, with Louisiana historian Charles Gayer's publication of the American General's Correspondence with Esteban Rodriguez Mira, Louisiana's colonial governor between 1785 and 1791. Other historians subsequently added to the catalog of Wilkerson's treacherous activities. It says the latter view, some 65 years after the general's misdeeds, then governor of New York Theodore Roosevelt condemned him in print. In all our history, there is no more despicable character. Historian Robert Lackley characterized him as a general who never won a battle or lost a court-martial, while Frederick Jackson Turner called Wilkerson the most consummate artist in treason that the nation ever possessed. George Roger Clark, biograph Temple Bloodley, said of Wilkerson he had considerable military but used it only for his own gain. Now, they went in after this dude. They say in Legacy, Frankfort, Kentucky's downtown was created from the land owned by Wilkerson, and he designed the layout. A major street which runs along historical Liberty Hall was named Wilkerson Street. In New Orleans, has a short street called Wilkerson, named for James Wilkerson in the French Quarter near Jackson Square. There is also a Wilkerson Street in Mandeville, Louisiana. Many of the oldest streets in Mandeville close to Lake Pontchartrain are named after prominent New Orleans residents of the late 18th and early 19th centuries, or for the Battle of New Orleans heroes. Wilkerson County, Georgia, is named for Wilkerson. A Georgia historical marker on the courthouse square gives a brief biography of the general and identifies him as the source of the county's name. The entry of the county and the usual reliable reference, Georgia Place, names by the late Kenneth Cavor, confused James Wilkerson with James Marion Wilkerson, a Valdosta, Georgia politician and railroad executive. But the latter Wilkerson was born decades after the county was founded. Then it goes on to Wilkinson County, Mississippi. It's named for General Wilkerson. As well, it was there in the old Natchez district that Wilkerson spent much of his time, allegedly plotting the Burr conspiracy. Fort Adams, then an important U.S. Army post, was constructed by Wilkerson as the most southwesterly point in the U.S. and the last American stop on the Mississippi River before entering Spanish territory. Goes on to say Wilkerson was an avid supporter of the military short hair codes. Again, Wilkerson was an avid supporter of the military short hair codes. He attempted to prosecute Colonel Thomas Butler, a veteran of both the Revolutionary and Indian Wars, for keeping his hair long. Colonel Butler died before the trials closed. He never did cut his long braided queue prior to his death. And a possible part of the story tells that his last request was for a hole to be drilled in his casket so that the queue could hang out and taunt Wilkerson even in death. Dang. Like, man, when I go, drill holes in my casket and let my hair hang out. And that's basically the story on what they got here on Wilkerson, on James Wilkerson in Wilkerson County, who was known to be a spy for the Spanish, who was known to be working for the Spanish.
Highly paid.
Getting broke.
A bad maker up of lies. He's not a good liar, I tell you that. Nobody believes his stories.
Nobody believes him. Probably half himself don't believe him half the time. I'm just saying.
Why you always lying?
Facts, LJ. Yeah, it sounds very, very scripted. But like they said, we know about the Burr and Allen and the Hamilton story. We couldn't find out this dude got something to do with that. Ain't that something? But I know to you, no, so like
Peter
that's
said go to Burr and Hamilton.
yeah, that's what I'm doing
Go ahead,
now. Looking up Burr and Hamilton. Now I know it's in this part of the story should be interesting to you because that's the area of, if I'm correct, remember correctly, one of the tribes your family identified with, the Natchez.
Yeah, possibly. Yep, quite possibly. That's the area we were in forever. The southernmost, what is it? Southernmost part of the United States.
That's a good question. If he had long braided hair, who was he? Who was the dude on pictures of?
Hmm. Yeah.
Things that make you say,
Mm-hmm.
He around here got flowing locks. Like, let him hang. You see me?
Pull them out the holes. Yeah. Let 'em hang out.
Yeah, I want to hold for each one. Bro, hold each one. I need each lock hanging out. Each one. Not two to the same hole. No.
Nope.
Yeah, pulling up. Let me post this in the chat. This is Burr and Hamilton. A lot of people know about the dude, but we finna read the information and go in on it. Posting this right now. Okay.
Peace, Marlon P.
Peace. Grand Rising to everyone coming out in the chat. Anyone we missed. I just posted the link where you're finna read from in the chat. And this is the Burr and Hamilton duel. It says Burr Hamilton duel was fought at the Weehawken, New Jersey, between Vice President Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton, the former Secretary of Treasury. It occurred on July 11, 1804, and was the accumulation of a long and bitter rivalry between the two. Vice President Burr shot Hamilton, while Hamilton's shot broke a tree branch directly above Burr's head. Hamilton was carried to the home of William Bayard Jr., where he died the next day. Let's move further down to where it goes in. It says the background. The Burr and Hamilton duel is one of the most famous personal conflicts in American history. It was a pistol duel which arose from long-standing personal bitterness that developed between the two men over the course of several years. Tensions rose with Hamilton's journalistic defamation of Burr's character during the 1804 New York gubernatorial race, in which Burr was a candidate. The duel was fought at a time when the practice was being outlawed in the northern United States, and it had immense political ramifications. Burr survived the duel and was indicted for murder in both New York and New Jersey. Though those charges were later either dismissed or resulted in acquittal, the harsh criticism and mostly directly toward him following the duel brought an end to his political career. The Federalist Party was already weakened by the death of John Adams in the presidential election of 1800 and was further weakened by Hamilton's death. It goes further on to state, the duel was the final skirmish of a long conflict between Democrats and Republicans and Federalists. The conflict began in 1791 when Burr won a United States Senate seat from Philip Schuler, Hamilton's father-in-law, who would have supported Federalist policies. Hamilton was the Secretary of the Treasury at the time. The Electoral College then deadlocked in the election of 1800, during which Hamilton's maneuvering in the House of Representatives caused Thomas Jefferson to be named president and Burr was vice president. Hamilton's animosity toward Burr was severe and well documented in personal letters to his friends and compart James McHenry. The following quotation from one of these letters on January 4th, 1801. It says, amplifies his bitterness. Nothing has given me so much charging as the intelligence that the Federal Party was thinking seriously of supporting Mr. Burr for president. I should consider the execution of the plan as devoting the country in signing their own death warrant. Mr. Burr will probably make stipulations, but he will laugh in his sleeves while he makes them, and will break them the first moment it may serve his purpose. Say Hamilton details that many charges that he has against Burr, and a more extensive letter written shortly after, calling him a voluptuous and extreme. Hold on. Hate when it pops and move away. A profligate, an extreme, accusing him of corrupting, severing the interests of the Holland Land Company while a member of the legislature, criticizing his military commission and accusing him of resigning it under false pretense, and many more serious accusations. It became clear that Jefferson would drop Burr from his ticket in the 1804 election. So the vice president ran for the governorship of New York instead. Hamilton campaigned vigorously against Burr, who was running as an independent, causing him to lose Morgan Lewis, a Democratic Republican endorsed by Hamilton. Both men had been involved in duels in the past. Hamilton had participated in 10 duels where the pistol failed to fire. Prior to his fatal encounter with Burr, including duels with William Gordon, Adonis Burke, John Francis Mercer, James Nicholson, James Monroe, Ebenezer Prudy, and George Clinton. He also served as a second to John Laurens in the 1779 duel with General Charles Lee, and to legal client John Dodge in a 1787 duel with William Pierce. Hamilton also claimed that he had one previous honor dispute with Burr, while Burr stated there were two. Reading that, it seemed like back then, anytime you had a negotiation with government, y'all shot it at.
Exactly.
Because I'm looking at the names.
I hope it's gun jam.
Yeah, they had what? Gunfights with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 gun duels in his lifetime. And they said 2 with a pistol. Hamilton had participated in 10 duels where the pistol failed to fire. And those are the 10 times that he shot a gun and it didn't go off. You got bad luck, and you still want to do with somebody if you don't sit down somewhere?
I know, right? Yeah. Better wait for the new guns to come out.
Throw rocks at each other. I'm just a saying. Then it goes down to the election of 1800. Burr and Hamilton first came into public opposition during the United States presidential election of the 1800s. Burr ran for vice president on the Democratic-Republican ticket, along with presidential candidate Thomas Jefferson, against President John Adams, the Federalist incompetent, and his vice presidential running mate Charles C. Pinckney. Electoral College rules at the time gave each electoral 2 votes for president. The candidate who received the second most votes became vice president. The Democratic/Republican Party planned to have 72 of their 73 electoral votes hate when stuff moving away and pop up. All right, here we go. 72 of their 73 electoral. 72 of their 73 electoral votes for both Jefferson and Burr, with the remaining electoral voting only for Jefferson. The electors failed to execute this plan, so Burr and Jefferson were both tied with 73 votes each. The Constitution stipulates that if no candidate wins a majority, the election is moved to the House of Representatives, which was controlled by the Federalists. At this point, many of whom were loath to vote for Jefferson. Hamilton regarded Burr as far more dangerous than Jefferson and used all his influence to ensure Jefferson's election. On the 36th ballot, the House of Representatives gave Jefferson the presidency, with Burr becoming vice president. Charles Copper's letter. On April 24, 1804, the Albany Register published a letter opposing Burr's candidacy, which was originally sent from Charles D. Copper to Hamilton's father-in-law, former Senator Philip Schuyler. It made reference to a previous statement by Copper. General Hamilton and Judge Kent had declared in substance that they looked upon Mr. Burr to be a dangerous man and one who ought not be trusted with the reins of government. Copper went on to emphasize that he could describe in detail a still more despicable opinion which General Hamilton has expressed of Burr at a political dinner. Burr responds in a letter delivered by William P. Van Ness, which pointed particularly to the phrase "more despicable" and demeaned an unqualified acknowledgement of or denial of the use of any expression which would warrant the assertion of Dr. Copper. Hamilton's verbose reply on June 20th, 1804, indicated that he could not be held responsible for Copper's interpretation of his words, yet he did not fault that interpretation, concluding that he would abide the consequences should Burr remain unsatisfied. A recurring theme in their correspondence is that Burr seeks a vow or disavow of anything that could justify Copper's characterization, while Hamilton protests there are no specifics. Burr replied on June 21st, 1804, also delivered by Van Ness, stating that political opposition can never absolve gentlemen from the necessity of a rigid adherence to the laws of honor and the rules of decorum. Hamilton replied that he had no other answer to give than that which has already been given. This letter was delivered to Nathaniel Pennington on June 22nd, but did not reach Burr until June 25th. The delay was due to negotiation between Pennington and Van Ness, in which Pennington submitted the following paper. The paper states, General Hamilton says he cannot imagine what Dr. Copper may have alluded, unless it were to a conversation at Mr. Taylor's in Albany last winter, at which he and General Hamilton were present. General Hamilton cannot recollect distinctly the particulars of that conversation, so as to undertake to repeat them without running the risk of varying or omitting what might be deemed important circumstances. The expressions are entirely forgotten, and the specific idea is imperfectly remembered, but to the best of his recollection, it consisted of comments on the political principles and views of Colonel Burr, and the results that may be expected from them in the event of his election as governor, without reference to any particular instance of past conduct or private character. Goes on to state, eventually Burr issued a formal challenge, and Hamilton accepted. Many historians have considered the cause of the duel to be flimsy, and have thus characterized Hamilton as suicidal, Burr as malicious and murderous, or both. Thomas Fleming offers the theory that Burr may have been attempting to recover his honor by challenging Hamilton, whom he considered to be the only gentleman among his defectors, in response to the slanderous attacks against his character, published during the 1804 campaign. Hamilton's reason for not engaging in the duel included his role as father and husband, putting his creditors at risk and placing his family's welfare in jeopardy. But he felt that it would be impossible to avoid a duel because he had made attacks on Burr, which he was unable to recant, and because of Burr's behavior prior to the duel, he attempted to reconcile his moral and religious reasons and the codes of honors and politics. Jonah Freeman speculates that Hamilton intended to accept the duel and throw away his shot to satisfy his moral political codes. It says the duel. In the early morning of July 11, 1804, Burr and Hamilton departed from Manhattan by separate boats and rowed across the Hudson River to a spot known as the Heights of Weehawken, New Jersey, a popular dueling ground below the towering cliffs of the New Jersey Palisades. Dueling had been prohibited in both New York and Jersey, but Hamilton and Burr agreed to take the duel to Weehawken between 17 no Weehawken because New Jersey was not as aggressive in prosecuting dueling participants as New York. The same site was used for 14 known duels between 1700 and 1845. They also took steps to give all witnesses plausible deniability in an attempt to shield themselves from prosecution. For example, the pistols were transported to the island in a portamue, enabling the rowers to say under oath that they had not seen any pistols. They also stood with their backs to the duelists. Burr, William Peter Van Nessens, his second, Matthew L. Davis, another man, often identified as John Swartout, and the rowers all reached the site at 6:30 a.m., whereupon Swartout and Van Ness started to clear the underbush from the dueling ground. Hamilton Judge Nathaniel Pennington, his second, and David Hossack arrived a few minutes before 7. Lots were cast for the choice of position and which second should start the duel. Both were won by Hamilton's second, who chose the upper edge of the ledge for Hamilton, facing the city. However, Joseph Ellis claims that Hamilton had been challenged and therefore had choice of both weapon and position. Under this account, it was Hamilton himself who chose the upstream or north side position. The duel took place near the area where Philip Hamilton had lost a duel to George Eckler 3 years earlier. Further states, at first-hand accounts of the duel, agreed that 2 shots were fired. Although the seconds disagreed on the interviewing time between the shots, it was common for both principals in a duel to fire a shot at the ground to exemplify courage, and then the duel could come to an end. Hamilton apparently fired a shot above Burr's head. Burr returned the fire and hit Hamilton in the lower abdomen, above the right hip. The large caliber lead ball ricocheted off Hamilton's third or second false rib, fracturing it and causing considerable damage to his internal organs, particularly his liver and diaphragm, before lodging in his first or second lumbar vertebra. According to Pennington's account, Hamilton collapsed almost immediately, dropping the pistol involuntarily, and Burr moved toward him in a speechless manner, which Pennington deemed to be indicative of regret, before being hustled away behind the umbrella by Van Ness because Hossack and the rowers were already approaching. It is entirely uncertain which principal fired first, as both seconds' backs were to the duel in accordance with the prearranged regulations of the duel, and so that the men could later testify that they saw no fire. After much research determined the actual events of the duel, historian Joseph Elliff gave his best guess. And it says Hamilton did fire his weapon intentionally, and he fired first, but he aimed to miss, Burr sending his ball into the tree above and behind Burr's location. In so doing, he did not withhold his shot, but he did waste it, thereby honoring his pre-duel pledge. Meanwhile, Burr, who did not know nothing about the pledge, did know that a projectile from Hamilton's gun had whizzed past him and crashed into the tree to his rear. According to the principles of the code, Burr was perfectly justified in taking deadly aim at Hamilton and firing to kill. It says David Hossack's account. Hossack wrote his account on August 17th, about 1 month after the duel had taken place. He testified that he had only seen Hamilton in the 2 seconds disappear into the wood, heard 2 shots and rushed to find a wounded Hamilton. He also testified that he had not seen Burr, who had been hidden behind an umbrella by Van Ness. He gives a very clear picture of the events in a letter to William Coleman. When called to him upon his receiving the fatal wound, I found him sitting on the ground, supported in arms of Mr. Pennington. His countenance of death I shall never forget. He had at this instant just the strength to say, "This is a mortal wound, doctor." When he sunk away, he became to all appearance lifeless. I immediately stripped up his clothes, and soon, alas, I asserted that the direction of the ball must have been through some vital part. His pulse was not to be felt. His respiration was entirely suspended, and upon laying my hand on his heart and perceiving no motion there, I considered him as irrecoverably gone. I, however, observed to Mr. Pennington that the only chance for his reviving was immediately to get him upon the water. We there lifted him up and carried him out of the wood to the margin of the bank, where the bergsman aided us in convoying him to the boat, which immediately put off. During all this time, I could not discover the least symptoms of returning life. I now rubbed his face, lips, and temples with spirits of hartshorn, applied to his neck, breast, and to the wrists and palms of his hands, and endeavored to pour some in his mouth. Allsat goes on to say that Hamilton had revived after a few minutes, either from the hawthorn or fresh air. He finishes his letter. Goes further on to say, soon after recovering his sight, he happened to cast his eyes. I couldn't hear you. What'd you say?
No, I was just saying that the hawthorn is just smelling salts.
Yeah. It says, soon after recovering his sight, he happened to cast his eyes upon the case of pistols, and observing that one that he had in his hand lying on the outside, he said, "Take care of that pistol. It is undischarged and still cocked. It may go off and do harm." Pennington knows, attempted to turn his head towards him, that I did not intend to fire at him. "Yes," said Mr. Pennington, understanding his wish. "I have already made Dr. Halsack acquainted with your determination as to that." He then closed his eyes and remained calm, without any disposition to speak. Nor did he say much after, except reply to my question. He asked me once or twice how I found his post, and he informed me that his lower extremities had lost all feeling, manifesting to me that he had entered no hopes that he should long survive. Goes on, we'll finish up with the statements that says Hamilton's intentions. No, say statements to the press. Pennington and Van Ness issued a press statement about the events of the duel, which pointed out the agreed upon dueling rules and events that transpired. It stated that both participants were free to open fire once they had been given the order to present. After first fire had been given, the opponent's second would count to three. Upon the opponent would fire or sacrifice his shot. Pennington and Van Ness disagree as to who fired the first shot, but they concur that both men had fired within a few seconds of each other, as they must have. Neither Pennington nor Van Ness mentions counting down. In Pennington's amended version of the statement, he and a friend went to the site of the duel the day after Hamilton's death to discover where Hamilton's shot went, the statement reads. They ascended that the ball passed through the limb of a cedar tree and at an elevation of about 12 feet and a half from the ground, between 13 and 14 feet from the mark on which General Hamilton stood, and about 4 feet wide of the direct line between him and Burr. On the right side, he had fallen on the left. So what you think about this so far, No Sellout?
Man, you got a death wish. You got somebody who's looking to kill somebody. I don't know. I don't know.
I'm saying, going wild.
I guess it's
real.
Exactly. Look, they had to whisk him away and all this before the cops came. I guess I don't know. They illegally dueling in New Jersey right now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not right now, but right now.
Free, like, how's water supposed to revive you from a mortal gunshot wound? Splash some water on them. I'm good.
It helped the fish. I don't know. They gave that man smelling salts after he took his last breath. I don't know how he's supposed to breathe in smelling salts.
Greetings, gentlemen. I hope I'm coming through loud and clear.
Are on our end.
I wanted to touch on that because now we're going to connect the dots. Going back to Wilkinson, remember Alexander Hamilton, and he wanted to control everything west of the Mississippi, and wanted to make that new that whole area of the Louisiana Purchase its own country. And Burr, as you're reading, wanted to do the same thing, but starting in Texas. That was the initial issue when it came to the conflict between the two of them. But Wilkinson, although Wilkinson was married to an associate of Burr's, he was loyal to Hamilton. So this is why the plot thickens when Wilkinson started to turn on Burr and make Burr look like the bad guy. It was all about the land that was west of the Mississippi being its own country. Follow the breadcrumbs, it'll start to make sense. I yield the mic. This thing on?
You know I can't follow that. Mic check, bone. Am I still echoing? Mic check to the chat.
You sound clear here.
Maybe everybody should be in the Zoom call. Peace, Carrie. All right, so I'm gonna read Hamilton's intention. So Bones shows that guy. Hamilton wrote a letter before the duel titled "Statement on Impending Duel with Aaron Burr," in which he stated that he was strongly opposed to the practice. Mic check. Okay, Golden Moon, appreciate it. In which he stated that he was strongly opposed to the practice of dueling for both religious and practical reasons. Quote, "I have resolved," unquote. It continued, "If our interview is conducted in the usual manner and it pleases God to give me the opportunity to reserve and throw away my first fire, and I have thoughts even of reserving my second fire." Hamilton regained consciousness after being shot and told Dr. Hozak that his gun was still loaded and that Pendleton knows I did not mean to fire at him, quote unquote. This is evidence for the theory that Hamilton intended not to fire, honoring his pre-duel pledge, and only fired accidentally upon being hit. Such an intention would have violated the protocol of the Code Duello, and where Burr learned of it, he responded, "Contemptible if true." Hamilton could not have thrown away his shot by firing into the ground, thus possibly signaling Burr of his purpose. Modern historians have debated to what extent Hamilton's statements and letter represent his true beliefs, and how much of this was a deliberate attempt to permanently ruin Burr if Hamilton were killed. An example of this may be seen in what one historian has considered to be the deliberate attempts to provoke Burr on the dueling ground. Hamilton performed a series of deliberately provocative actions to ensure a lethal outcome. As they were taking their places, he asked that the proceeding stop, adjusted his spectacles, and slowly, repeatedly sighted along his pistol to test his aim. He was doing a mic check, gun check, aim check. All right, on Burr's intention. There is reason to think that Burr may have intended to kill Hamilton. The afternoon after the duel, he was quoted as saying that he would have shot Hamilton in the heart had his vision not been impaired by the morning mist. English philosopher Jeremy Bentham met with Burr in England in 1808, 4 years after the duel, and Burr claimed to have been certain of his ability to kill Hamilton. Bentham concluded that Burr was a little better than a murderer. Wow, quote unquote, little better than a murderer. There is also evidence in Burr's defense. Had Hamilton apologized for his, quote, more despicable opinion of Mr. Burr, unquote, offensive, just so offensive. All would have been forgotten. However, neither principal could avoid the confrontation honorably, and thus each was forced into the duel for the sake of personal honor. Burr also was unsure of Hamilton's intentions, and he could not be sure if Hamilton had thrown away his shot or simply missed his target when he fired into the brush above Burr's head. According to the principles of Code Duello, Burr was entirely justified in taking aim at Hamilton under the hypothesis that Hamilton had shot first. Burr knew of Hamilton's public opposition to his vice presidential run in 1800. Hamilton made confidential statements against him, such as those enumerated in his letter to Supreme Court Justice Rutledge. In the attachment to that letter, Hamilton argued against Burr's character on numerous scores. He suspected Burr on strong grounds of having corruptly served the views of the Holland Company. His very friends do not insist on his integrity. He will court and employ able and daring scoundrels. He seeks supreme power in his own person and will, in all likelihood, attempt usurpation. Usurpation. I know what usurp is, and so forth. Pistols. The pistols used in the duel belonged to Hamilton's brother-in-law, John Barker Church, who was a business partner of both Hamilton and Burr. Later, legend claimed that these pistols were the same ones used in a 1799 duel between Church and Burr, in which neither man was injured. Burr, however, wrote in his memoirs that he supplied the pistols for his duel with Church and that they had belonged to him. The Wagdon and Barton dueling pistols incorporated a hair trigger feature that could be set by the user. Hamilton was familiar with the weapons and would have been able to use the hair trigger. However, Pendleton asked him before the duel whether he would use the hairspring, and Hamilton reportedly replied, "Not this time." Hamilton's son, Philip, and George Eaker likely used the Church weapons in the duel in which Philip died in 1801, 3 years before the Burr-Hamilton duel. They were kept at Church's estate, Belvedere, until the late 19th century. They were sold in 1930 to the Chase Manhattan Bank, now part of J.P. Morgan Chase, and are on display in the bank's headquarters at 270 Park Avenue in New York City. New York City. Mic check. Am I still echoing from earlier? Anybody? Mic check. Grand Rising. Mic check. Everybody knew.
You sound clear here.
All right. Aftermath. The mortally wounded Hamilton was taken to the home of William Bayard Jr. in New York, where he received communion from Bishop Benjamin Moore. He died the next day after seeing his wife Elizabeth and their children in the presence of more than 20 friends and family members. He was buried in the Trinity Churchyard Cemetery in Manhattan. Hamilton was an Episcopalian at his death. His political ally, Governor Morris, gave the eulogy at his funeral and established a private fund to support his widow and children. Burr was charged with murder in New York and New Jersey, but neither charge reached trial. In Bergen County, New Jersey, a grand jury indicted him for murder in November 1804, but the New Jersey Supreme Court quashed it on a motion from Colonel Ogden. Burr fled to St. Simon's Island, Georgia, and stayed at the plantation of Pierce Butler, but soon returned to Washington, D.C. to complete his term as vice president. I'm on a run. He presided over the impeachment trial of Samuel Chase, quote, which with the dignity and impartiality of an angel, but with the rigor of a devil, unquote, according to a Washington newspaper. Burr's heartfelt farewell speech to the Senate in March 1805 moved some of his harshest critics to tears. What? With his political career apparently over, Burr went west, where he became involved in filibuster plans, which some later claim were intended to establish a new independent empire carved out of the Louisiana Territory. General James Wilkinson worked with him, but he had a change of heart and betrayed their plans to President Jefferson. Burr allegedly tried to recruit William Eaton, and Eaton accused him in letters to Jefferson that led to Burr's arrest and trial for treason. He was acquitted of all charges, but his reputation was further damaged, and he spent the following years in Europe. He finally returned to New York City in 1812, where he resumed his law practice and spent the remainder of his life in relative obscurity. Man.
Wait. Go back again. They wanted to do what? With what territory?
Let me run that back real quick. Okay. With his political career apparently over, Burr went west, where he became involved in quote filibuster quote unquote plans, which some later claimed were intended to establish a new independent empire carved out of the Louisiana Territory. And James Wilkinson worked with him, but he had a change of heart and betrayed their plans to President Jefferson. So, yeah.
Well, now.
A whole lot of double dealing, I see. A whole lot of. Just, all you can say is, my, no Johnny Gill.
And that was the initial conflict that caused the duel between Hamilton and Burr. They were both jockeying for the same territory.
Yeah, that's what I was getting from the story. It seemed like they had a bit of rivalry because they wanted the same area, the same land.
And Wilkinson was loyal to Spain, and that's why he sold the beans to Thomas Jefferson. Because it gets back to Burr killed Hamilton, because again, the part of the duel was, and they keep saying that, he had every right to kill him, but the duel was whoever shot first was the winner, which is why Hamilton hit the tree branch and Burr shot him. Because they had a conflict on who was going to control the new independent nation west of the Mississippi. And Burr, after Burr had eliminated Hamilton, he thought he was a shoo-in. Hamilton had already started making revisions with the Issa, or the Catawba suit, to be his navy. He already had everything in the works. Burr didn't like it. Burr had